Welcome to the Citizen Game Podcast. I'm Ryan, and this is my dear comrade in arms, George. And we are going to be discussing the rest of Spec Ops The Line. Now that we've crossed the line, we'll see what's on the other side of it.
I love that quote where he goes, "We're Spec Ops, and we've just crossed the line."
We've crossed the line. Yeah, it's right after they vaporize like 50 war refugees.
I mean, that's definitely crossing a line. You kind of just jump into combat pretty soon. And how are you, if you can remember, how are you feeling at this point?
Well, me, personally, I'm like, well, I guess I get what this game is now. I guess I get what people were talking about, because I'd come into this game late, and I kind of knew it was supposed to be something special. And after the white phosphorus sequence, I was like, okay, that's what this is. And then the combat that happens after that is just kind of a blank.
You're just fighting up a hill, and it's the first part where the combat just starts to feel like, oh god, more of this shit.
Because then you get to the room with the burned bodies, and you find the radio. And that's where the rest of the plot kind of picks up.
Did you guess at all that there was some psychological trickery, or was that a complete surprise at the end?
I mean, I kind of figured that later. I didn't figure on. I don't remember, actually. I don't think I knew he was dead. I mean, obviously I knew some of it was a hallucination, like later.
Right, because it gets...
I didn't know all of it was a hallucination. Because obviously later when you see visions of him and he's walking towards you and he's like, how many people are still alive?
Yeah. When it goes full
that
on.
is obviously fake. But I don't think I guessed that Conrad was dead the whole time.
Yeah, I think at that point, I was pretty, the game had me wrapped around, like, I was in the similar headspace of Walker, where I was like, wow, that was horrendous. We really got to get this guy Conrad for making me do that in this video game.
Yeah.
So it just, I mean, even if you're thinking, like, I should just pack up and go home, it's just enough plot justification to see it through the end.
Right.
But it's pretty... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to move on, so if you want to talk.
Oh, yeah, I was moving on to... Like, I don't think there's a whole lot of interesting stuff until you're introduced to the head CIA dude, Riggs.
Does that happen before or after the two men hung on the bridge?
Oh, you're right. That comes up.
That's the next interesting... Because that happens right after you get the radio and you start talking to Conrad.
Right, which it clearly demonstrates that this is Walker's psychological break, because that's when that shit starts. Yeah, it's pretty soon after.
Right, so you have the two men on the bridge, and Conrad forces you to choose, and there are snipers, etc., etc. It's interesting because... So you mentioned how the original plan had been to have you be able to try to rush the encampment and lose.
Right, yeah.
And then give up and use white phosphorus. Because that is possible here. You can keep trying to kill all the snipers and save both the hostages, but it's just kind of functionally impossible with the way the game works.
And it is like, no matter what choice you make, you get attacked. Because it's not because they're just guys there attacking you. It's not a plan by...
Right, because at the end of the game we learned that those two men were just dead. And the snipers are just waiting for you, I guess. And that even if you saved one of them, you actually didn't. Because they were dead already.
I think what a lot of people got out of this, with like games criticism at the time, was when there were like moral choices, you're not considering the morality of your common actions within the game. It's like, okay, here's the point in the game where you choose to be a good or bad person, and not talking about whether just the baseline shit you're doing is good or bad, which is what this choice is meant to demonstrate.
That everyone you've killed up to this point didn't matter because you didn't have a choice. Only these two people matter.
if we're looking at it from Walker hallucinating, he's coming up with this so he has an opportunity to make like a moral choice that means
to save
something.
someone.
Yeah.
But because I believe the game's writer Walt Williams, right?
Yes.
He said that a big part of it was that they wanted to have a moral choice that's not real, that doesn't matter, because he doesn't like it in games where it seems like the player just has total agency over the world and gets to just make every important decision. And like a lot of the things, because in real life, I guess, a lot of the things that affect the outcome of situations are not in any one person's hands. That you don't get to make those choices.
I think bringing that up allows me to go on a bit of a tangent with... So I mentioned last episode that Super Bunny Hop, he brought up, some criticisms of this game. And just the general, like, I can't, it feels false because there's no choice to be made or whatever. And a counterexample that he gave was This War of Mine, which I've been playing through. And of course, that is like a survival game where the gameplay is all just harsh choices, and you don't have to ever steal from people or kill anyone unless if you kind of fuck up your management beforehand. And so to him, that felt more powerful because it didn't have to happen. You didn't have to make a bad choice, but you were coerced into one by circumstances. And I do agree, like, because I've been playing it. It is very compelling, and it works well. But I do think there's a case for a linear story game like this. When you're enlisted in the army or something like that, or you're a cop, or even you're just like a shitty boss or something, it's like there really is a limit to, even though you're making tons of choices that hurt people, you really aren't making those choices. Like you said, you were just a function of a larger machine. And so, yeah, okay, you're upset that you had to pick the white phosphorus thing, and there wasn't really a choice. And it's like, okay, well, I think that's a valid feeling. I think that's not a mark against this game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I basically agree with that. I also think that the criticism around story-based, the idea that games need to give like player agency is necessary to make like a compelling story-based game. That, well, games are an interactive medium, so obviously when you're trying to tell stories with them, you should focus on making the story as interactive as possible. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think that artistic forms or artistic mediums need to always... There's this tendency in criticism of like, well, what can this medium do that nothing else can?
Right. I remember you speaking about this.
Yeah, and I don't really think that's always productive.
So, do we want to talk about Riggs now?
Yeah, sure.
But she's just one of the most fucking hateable guys.
Yeah. So I was actually... something that surprised me when I played through it this time is kind of how little... I think in my memory I had them having more time with Riggs.
No, it's pretty quick.
Before they get the water and they do that whole thing. I thought that there was more downtime in the game, I guess, than there actually is. Because the whole game takes place over the course of essentially a single day.
Yeah.
And I had kind of stretched that timeline out. But yeah, so you meet Riggs. He's like an NPC ally for a bit.
Yeah, and immediately the team is like, fuck this guy. But you continue to work with him.
Because he trained the people who were trying to kill you at the beginning of the game. He's the reason that this militia that were the first enemies exist.
And if we want to circle back to like choices and stuff, it's there in the writing where your whole team is like, fuck this guy, but you're still working with him. There's nothing else to do. Like I think Walker says, he's the only guy not trying to shoot us. So you go on and you work with this guy that you fucking hate.
And then you steal the water.
Can we talk about the fact that it's the aquarium?
Right. That confuses me a little bit.
That's something that I never thought about, like, years ago. And then I'm like, wait a second. Does that make any sense at all?
Because aquarium water is obviously not drinkable because a lot of it's salt water and a lot of it's not treated properly to be drinkable by humans.
I honest to God did some like Google search. I was like, is there any truth to this at all? And the answer is no. And now it seems clearly to me it's like they picked that for the imagery and...
Because it's cooler than fighting in a water treatment plant.
Right. And I gotta say, for as kind of nonsense as it is, I still kind of like it. And it kind of fits into the weird dream logic, the subtle dream logic of the game.
Right.
Because you have the big blue sign, like...
Yeah, so you have him stealing... And am I wrong, or does the Burj Khalifa still have a fucking fountain outside it when we get to it?
I don't remember. I mean,
I think it does.
Well, are you talking about like when you go inside too? Because there's all that aquarium water and stuff.
Yeah. And I don't know how much of that's supposed to be hallucination.
I think that's completely... Well, we'll get to the ending.
Yeah, but... So, for whatever reason, the water's all at the aquarium, and you steal it, and then... I don't even know where you're trying to get it to, but you fail, and the trucks are destroyed.
But, of course, that was the objective, to just get rid of it.
And then Riggs is dying, and you get to decide whether to shoot him or not. Did you shoot him?
I think I shot him the first time. Every subsequent playthrough, I let him burn.
Right, I shot him.
I was like, I don't know, you are... I mean, I guess I got no room to talk, but you deserve this.
Yeah, it's also kind of weird because when you get to the ending and it shows you like a montage of everything, it shows Riggs burning no matter what. Like if you shoot Riggs when Conrad's giving his big monologue about how much you suck, it shows Riggs burning alive.
That's probably because those clips are like pre-recorded video.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it wouldn't have been that difficult to just sub in.
Hey, man, game development, like...
Yeah. It's just interesting. I don't know what it means.
I don't think it... I think it's because it was good enough and they shipped it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the water towers. Like, obviously, the white phosphorus, you go, oh shit, But maybe you can say, okay, that was like a mistake. But by the time you're stealing water, you're probably thinking like, I am the bad guy right now.
Yeah, and then when Riggs says that the whole plan is to just kill everyone in the city.
I really like that quote that, you hallucinate Conrad for a second, which that should be a clue that he's not real, that he just walks up to you and talks to you, and he says, like, everything is teetering on the edge of everything. And, just describing the perilous state of the whole thing. And then, I believe the next part, next big thing is the radio man.
Right, because when I saw Walker come up to you and be like, everything is teetering on the edge of everything.
You mean Conrad?
I don't remember if I thought he was... Conrad, sorry. I don't remember if I thought he was real. I'm pretty sure I thought that was fake, but Walker was... Or, like, he's talking to you through the
radio.
Radio, but you're just hallucinating him. Or maybe I did think it was real. I don't remember.
I think I want to take a moment just to... when you get into that chapter, like that Radio Man chapter, you're kind of just inexplicably on a rooftop, which happens a lot during the game, where you're just... Somehow the level starts off on a rooftop and you're always heading further down.
Yeah, I'm sure for symbolism reasons.
And just when I was like trying to talk about just the qualities of this game at like a baseline level, the imagery is just so much more engaging than something like a Call of Duty. Like, just the amount of colors you get out of this place versus, like COD 4. It's not just browns. You've got all of these blues and bright contrasts. And just on an artistic level, it's already a cut above without even getting into the writing. So you fight on those rooftops, and that's when the radio man, if you remember that sniping section where he is like, that guy, he had a family and kids. And
Yeah.
And just where it's it kind of goes into a different spot than, I don't know, The Last of Us Part 2, where it's not trying to make you feel, that part's not trying to make you feel guilty over soldiers. It's almost just like a morbid joke of like, holy shit, you're killing a lot of people. Like with showing the radio man.
It's also weird. Okay, so the radio man in that sequence also makes a joke, pretty late, that where he's like, I think it's the video games. And I don't know if that's them poking fun at themselves. Like, the radio man first makes an obviously facile attempt to make you feel bad for killing these people who are trying to kill you. And then he's like, I think violent video games are bad. And so I don't know if that's the developers, like, poking fun at their own story. By making themselves
what else would
the
it
radio
be?
man. Yeah, okay.
I'm trying. Yeah, that's what like. What else would it possibly be?
Other than self-parody?
Yeah, like it's just a cutesy little fourth wall break.
Yeah, but I don't, because maybe what I mean by that is it's interesting that they do that, but still the rest of the game is the unironic version of that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're making fun of themselves, but that doesn't mean they don't mean it. Is more what I'm getting at.
Okay. Yeah,
like,
I kind of see what you're saying.
Because the fact they're willing to make tongue-in-cheek pronouncements of what is kind of the game's own ideology, what does that indicate? Like, how seriously are they actually taking this critique of violent video games?
That's the thing, though, is this game, and I think what's feeding into this is, Walt Williams' own words, which is like, the point of the game isn't just violence bad.
Right.
It was very specifically drawn from, like, military shooters.
So I get that, and I don't know. I think it's funny, but just having, it's like, that guy had a family, and that's obviously, like, we're not actually supposed to think about that.
Yeah, and I think just pointing out the absurdity of the whole situation. And also how desensitized Radio Man is.
Okay, so can we talk about, at a plot level, is Radio Man in charge?
You asked this last episode,
right.
And it's like,
now
there's
that we're
no
actually
other
at him.
There's no other conclusion to draw.
There's no other member of the... He's not a member of the 33rd, actually, but there's no other living member of the 33rd who even has a name. Like, Radio Man is the only character... Radio Man is the only character who's not CIA or the main characters who's, like, a character.
Okay, Ryan, I gotta ask you,
Do
you know about the reading of this game where all of it is, like, hallucinating?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
When we get to the helicopter sequence immediately after the scene, we're about to discuss.
All right,
that
I just wanted to
the origin of most of those theories.
Yeah.
Because I think the helicopter scene is the starting point for pretty much all that discussion, so we'll do that after we discuss killing the Radio Man.
If we're talking about just taking the plot at face value, I think you could read it as maybe not exactly just giving complete order. Like, you can assume the 33rd is just in complete disarray and don't have communication with each other. And the Radio Man may say some shit, and they might listen to him, and they might not. It is weird, though, that you do have, like, a full-blown, like, platoon there. But then there's also... Do you remember Zulu Squad?
Right.
That's kind of weird.
Right, because there is still an elite unit who were a special forces unit embedded within the 33rd.
Yeah. And we know why that's there for gameplay reasons.
It's to give us some elite enemies, yeah.
Yeah.
But they sort of show up, because they show up immediately after, they show up a bit earlier, but they show up immediately after you kill the Radio Man. But no, because they show up, so they seem to be doing like dangerous jobs, right? Because they're sent to capture rigs, and then they're sent to rescue Radio Man, I guess, after you've already killed him, obviously. But so, if anything, if we're taking the plot again, assuming it's real, I think Radio Man might play a similar role to. This is kind of a dark reference, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But to the hate radios during the Rwandan genocide, if that makes any sense.
Elaborate, please.
He gets on the radio and says, hey, fuck these people. Go to their house, kill them. But he's not directly giving an order to anyone who he actually talks to.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. He
just knows people are listening, people with guns, who will do what he says because they've got nothing else to listen to. But he is not actually calling anyone and talking to them and giving them an order. He's just broadcasting from his rooftop station. And I guess he has, because there are other soldiers in that building, so I guess he's got like followers who are directly talking to him. But most of his power is probably just, because there's that moment when he broadcasts your location when you're in the hotel.
Right.
And he plays Nowhere to Run. And then he tells them where you are. So clearly the 33rd are listening to him.
Yeah.
But I don't know if because he's a civilian. The only civilian who actually like has a major speaking role in the game.
It's also just interesting that did you get like the intel where he's about to record Conrad and then he shuts off the recording because Conrad's like, you're like my dear friend and everything?
No, I did not get that.
Okay.
That's interesting. Because of course...
Oh, let me just elaborate on that just real quickly because there's the intel where it's like it seems like the Radio Man was trying to do some honest to God journalism, and then you've got some clips where he was trying to I forget the specifics, but he's going up to a politician. He's like, "Hey, why are you doing this bad thing, sir?" And then the later one is he's going to record Conrad. And then Conrad's is like, you are like a confidant, you're like my best friend. And the Radio Man is like, okay. And I turns off the recording because he's like, okay, we're buddies now. And then from that, starting off like a pretty typical journalist character to kind of a disillusioned, apathetic psycho. That's just interesting.
Right. So that is interesting because the Radio Man is the Harlequin from Heart of Darkness.
So it's been a while since I've read Heart of Darkness. I do not remember the specific role of the Harlequin.
The Harlequin is a Russian man who lives at Kurtz's camp. And he's called the Harlequin because he wears clothing that's like a patchwork of leather and fabric from different types of clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole thing is that he worships Kurtz.
That I do remember.
Like, he's there to be the white European voice of Kurtz's followers. Most of whom are black Africans who don't speak any language Marlowe speaks. So he's this English-speaking Russian who's here.
I guess you didn't get that, yeah.
Yes, and the American photojournalist in Apocalypse Now, who is the Harlequin, played by Dennis Hopper, he's the one who says, like, he's a warrior poet in the classic sense. You know, he is also there because most of Kurtz's followers don't speak English or speak Vietnamese or
I
don't remember the language you speak in Cambodia.
Right.
But and he's there to be the American who's part of this who could explain,
right,
why they worship Kurtz. But of course, this has the problem that Conrad's dead. So any relationship the Radio Man might have had with Conrad is obviously over now.
But he clearly did have the same sort of affection.
Right, and so is Radio Man doing what he thinks Conrad would want?
Yeah, I guess you'd read it like that.
Is he fulfilling Conrad's vision for the 33rd by doing this, or is he just insane?
It seems like he kind of, his sympathy towards Conrad is what leads him to, I guess it's implied he was coming there with a more critical eye and then was seduced by the heroism and stature of Conrad And
Because we know that all three, Conrad, Radio Man, and Walker, met in Kabul.
I forgot that the Radio Man
Yes,
was part of that too.
Yes, Walker knew Radio Man,
Yeah.
at least peripherally, in Kabul. And that's where Radio Man and Walker and Conrad met, because Radio Man was embedded with the 33rd. And then when they transferred from Kabul to the rescue mission in Dubai, because he was embedded with them, he just went with them. So he and Conrad would have known each other for a while. Like, because he was apparently there for Conrad's entire tour in Afghanistan.
But maybe not as a personal relationship as it became later.
Right. And that gets us to the question, I guess, of how responsible is Conrad for anything? Because there's a reading where Dubai only really goes to shit after Conrad kills himself.
I guess, but he clearly felt responsible.
He felt responsible for the failed evacuation. But was the 33rd shooting people in the street before he died?
That's a good point. At
That's,
what
like,
point
we
did
don't
he
know.
decide that
Right.
it was...
Those because they find his command staff having been incinerated in cold blood with white phosphorus.
Which
right?
Walker attributes to
Conrad. And based on the flashbacks we see, because that's where he finds the radio. And the radio's a real radio that's broken. But based on those flashbacks, those bodies are real.
Yeah.
Someone incinerated Conrad's command staff. But was that Conrad? Was that the rebels? Was that the 33rd after Conrad's death? It's just like so unclear what actually happened before Walker got there.
So the Radio Man gets owned.
Yes, Lugo fucking blows his brains out with like 3 shots, which is pretty great, and cements that Lugo is the one who's just coming apart, because both Walker and Adams freak out when he does that and yell at him.
They keep their
Because
shit locked in.
Radio Man's a valuable prisoner.
I gotta say,
and
though,
Lugo just
like,
kills him.
Lugo did seem the most relatable there, because it's like, yeah, what the fuck are we doing anyways? Like,
And Radio Man's
come
also
on.
like a huge prick.
Why not?
Like, yeah, him like twirling a cigarette and like making shitty jokes, wearing and he wears a Hawaiian shirt, so you know he's an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, so obviously Lugo's relatable there, but he still like shoots that guy like several times in the head and seems completely
clearly
unhinged.
with anger.
Yeah, clearly just totally coming apart. And then I actually had a lot of trouble with the escaping.
It
this
is
sequence. That's
one
the
of
sequence
the-
I died most.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the harder parts of the game.
Yeah, because you have all the Zulu squad who take like way more shots to kill, and it's a pretty open area, so it's really easy to get caught not in cover.
Then you got to do that turret section.
Yeah, and then you have to do the turret section, and then you get to the helicopter where you destroy the Radio Man's tower and then try to escape. And here's where we can talk about the theories that this is all a dream.
So, let me enlighten you a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Would it surprise you to know that the helicopter, like the starting sequence, wasn't originally supposed to be there, like at the beginning?
The in media res where you play this sequence?
And would it surprise you that that was a publisher demand?
No, because we need action in the opening of the game.
Right. So, Walt Williams, of course, hates that. And, I suppose the path of least resistance would be to go, like Metro 2033 does that for, like, no reason. And then you get there, it's like there's not really any importance except just to show you action later. But Walt Williams, he says, and I quote, "This was my story, and I'd burn it all down before I'd let them take it away from me." And so that's when he decides to write that the helicopter scene, the second one, is clearly something different.
Have Walker say this has happened before.
Yeah, so that whole decision was kind of to take control back of the story.
Of the narrative, yeah. Because so that makes sense, because I understand the story would kind of flow better if you went right from the opening cutscene to the team arriving, instead of having the bizarre, like the prologue, whatever you want to call it, the in media res thing does feel super tacked on in the final game. And learning, so it is interesting because I was going to say, why would they do that? So the fact that it was not an artistic decision at all, but something like a purely like marketing driven one where it's like people are going to be fucking bored.
It's kind of perfect though, because you have the shitty publisher enforced trope, and
We start in the middle of a
yeah.
gunfight with no context.
It is the whole subversion crystallized into its most base
Right.
form, where it's like,
And
we're
they
going to do
add-
that, but we're going to make
But they
it fucked
add
up.
one line that totally explodes the entire story of the game.
So
Which
do
is
you
Walker saying this has happened before.
do you also great moment? But do you
Yeah.
also are you also familiar with the white flashes are hallucinations?
Yes. Scenes that end with a fade to white are hallucinations. Scenes that end with a fade to black are real.
And so I
That
think
theory,
it's.
I'm well aware of it.
I mean, it's not a theory. It is the writer is like that's. It's kind of weird because he basically said that's what that is, which is that's a lot of artists more like to keep that close to the chest.
Yeah.
But I think what you're seeing is Walt Williams wanting to take back control of his story. That
Right.
they try to they let them do a lot, obviously, and in fact, Walt Williams even says so. But when they tried to take that little bit of control and do some stupid shit, he wanted to wrangle that back, even if it changes a lot.
So the fade to white thing, I knew that. My understanding was not that the fade to white indicates that the scene didn't happen.
No,
Just that it contains hallucinations.
I believe his exact statement was that the white flash means that Walker is lying to himself.
Right. And the fade to black means that the scene is true.
Yeah, and so the implication of that, of course, is that the white flash will happen over more innocuous parts of the story. And there's also, do you know about like Conrad in the billboards thing? That's in the start of the game. There's like a billboard or like a sign on a bus that's just Conrad's face. Like it's just staring right at you. And so that is the final load that all these other things like starting off in a high place and going lower, all just mixed together to feel like this story in its whole is not completely literal.
Well, yeah, it's a fictional story.
You know what I meant.
Right, but that's I kind of have disdain for any "it was all a dream" explanations. Purely because, of course, it's a dream. It's a video game.
But I don't.
It's not real.
The difference is it's not all a dream. It's a complete. You're seeing the game as the psychological output of Walker's mental state. Which fine,
Right.
if you want to be uncharitable, that is a dream. But the bigger implications are it's his guilt. It's all of his feelings are plastered into the literal plot events, which makes me like it.
But
like I
that
think it's a
makes me-
little.
I don't
weird.
like the things that therefore the literal plot events don't happen.
I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying that it didn't happen the way any section. It's an unreliable narrator. That's all.
Right. Yeah, and obviously you have that explicitly in the story.
Right. And which is weird because it's like there's two layers. There is obviously Walker's lying to himself, and then Walker. The whole game is just Walker's mind and not some more reliable telling.
So, well, let me explain the version of the theory I hate, which is that I've seen that. So the opening chopper gunner sequence,
Yeah, bitch. Chopper gunner.
where
Are you saying where he dies there?
yes, where that's actually Kabul.
Oh, I've never heard of
That's
it where
Kabul.
that's Kabul.
I've seen the theory that is Kabul or that represents Kabul. That Dubai never happened. That all of this is basically it's basically you haven't seen the movie, so I actually won't say what movie it basically is.
Jacob's Ladder?
Oh yeah, you have seen that. Right?
Yeah, I have seen it.
All right, sorry. It's basically Jacob's Ladder, where this is all Walker seeing people from his life and needing to confront his unspecified actions in Kabul. I hate that theory. It's so stupid. I hate just a dream theories. At least that one's kind of better because it at least assumes the first scene happened and then everything else is kind of not.
Right.
Generally, I hate Just a Dream theories.
So what about them? I heard more of just like they all die in that helicopter crash, and everything after that is completely fabricated.
I also don't like that at all.
I guess what gets me is like after the helicopter crash, it just seemed the landscape and the levels you're fighting through seem even more just... And I guess it's just that particular part, because that's like the big sand dunes with like boats and everything.
Right, but that's because the helicopter crashes during a sandstorm.
Right, I know. It doesn't matter. I would agree. It's stupid to think of the whole game as a dream. And like I said, I'm trying to draw a distinction where it's more... blah, blah, blah. Unreliable narrator, it's more about a psychological state. But the events in Dubai did happen. Maybe just not the way Walker interpreted them.
Right. And of course the game is not... Conrad's face showing up on a billboard on the side of a bus. There's also a degree to which that's for us.
That's true.
Like it's not to characterize Walker. It's because this is not real, and they're not strictly bound by either objective or psychological realism, because art doesn't have to be bound by those things.
Yeah.
It could just be, especially it's an interesting thing because obviously you will not recognize that your first playthrough.
No, it's very easy to miss.
Yeah, you don't see Conrad's face until the end of the game.
Right.
So, like, a player, even if they notice the face and they think it's weird, they will not recognize it as Conrad's until they get to the end of the game and see Conrad. Quote-unquote Conrad. And then, so the helicopter crashes. Is that when you get that sequence of where everything turns demonic?
Yeah, it's basically the Eye of Sauron.
Yeah, where the Burj Khalifa is, like, a rip in the universe.
Yeah.
And, like... hell is pouring through it, and you're just hearing Conrad tell you how many people were alive in Dubai this morning and how many people are alive now.
Yeah, it feels like, whether or not he literally dies or something, you have crossed into hell at that point.
Right, yeah. And especially, and obviously the sandstorms do create this... It's a sort of... The sandstorms are a way to create a surreal environment that still has an in-story explanation.
Yeah, so just to go back, like I said, basically a lot of gobbledygook. I'm just saying that all these things Walt Williams put and all this stuff just makes the game more surreal, and I like that.
Even if the game isn't strictly surreal, I don't think. It does make it more...
And where the video game elements even make it more surreal.
Yes, because they're acknowledged in a way they usually wouldn't be. But so then you fight through the sandstorm on the boat and shit to get to Lugo.
This is where the combat... Actually, this is where I died the most.
Really? I died a couple times here, too. I didn't die as much as I died fleeing the Radio Man's tower. But I died here a couple times.
And definitely the combat here is just like, this is
nightmare.
Completely nightmarish. I hate this.
Especially once the sandstorm comes in.
Right.
And you're trying to shoot at people that you can't see. That really sucks. But then, so it's him and Adams fighting to get to Lugo, who is calling you on the radio begging for help because he's wounded and unarmed. I mean, I think we can just get to when you find Lugo.
Oh, okay. Just before we jump into that, with the exhausting combat, we talk about the quiet time and like the Naughty Dog games and everything.
Yeah.
This game does not have a lot of it. And
no.
That feels, maybe it's just that we could only do a 6-hour game or something like that, but that feels like the right choice because you do not get the respite, you only get exhaustion. So Lugo is, you hear him over the radio.
Lynched on a street light.
Yeah.
He's lynched on a street light. You come and you find that a crowd of civilians have hung him and are screaming at the Americans to get out of their country.
And what choice did you make?
So, the first time I played this, I walked in and I melee attacked one person and they all scattered. I never played it where I massacred them.
I did that for my latest playthrough just to do it because I'd never done it before.
The massacre.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
like
because
that's
my
pretty
latest
sickening.
playthrough, I did the shoot in the air, and I think it's interesting. So, obviously, there's a big. Because I remember, I want to make sure, so maybe you could clip it, that in Yahtzee's review of this, he complains that you have no choice but to massacre them. I think in his review he says, like, you have no choice but to shoot them all.
Well, we'll just...
And he's wrong, obviously.
Check that
If
clip
I'm wrong,
right.
please make fun of me by playing a clip where he doesn't say that. I mean, I guess you can't play a clip where he doesn't say something. But if I'm wrong, please play a clip where he says, actually, I thought that you had a choice, whatever, in his stupid voice.
Oh, you ignorant little bastard. Stick your balls up your ass and clench yourself castrated.
Okay, but I think that's interesting, even if it's not strictly him, that I think there were some people who probably approached this and thought you had no choice.
I never read anything. A lot of people, including, I brought up, killing is harmless. Had the I hit them and I didn't even realize that I could just shoot in the air. And I did the same thing. I hit a guy. I think a lot of people, because there's a NPC that walks right up to you.
Right.
And
when
that's
you try
like
to walk through.
Yeah. And it is interesting. Yeah, that's what I
so
think that's what most people pick.
Right, but that's still the good option.
Right.
That still counts in the game as you taking the good option of just meleeing and knocking one person out and then everyone else scatters. Because there's the obvious bad option. I think that's supposed to be a trap for players who think the only way through something is to shoot it. That's pretty obviously the intent there. And the reason that, and especially because that's a moral choice, because you had the super cheesy moral choices where it was like, Adams is like, come with me, or shoot the guy, right? Or you have the two bodies next to each other. And so the real consequential moral choice in the game is never signposted. The game never tells you you have a choice other than shooting them. It never tells you you have to shoot them either, but it's a shooter game. Shooting them is the obvious choice. So it's an interesting way of having all these sort of one real moral choice, one fake moral choice, and then this kind of hidden choice that is the one that actually matters.
Yeah, definitely the most consequences. The most interesting thing about actually massacring the civilians is Adam's reaction to it. Where he enthusiastically yells, "Yes, sir," and then fucking guns them down with
because
you.
he whines about it if you shoot in the air.
Yeah.
He does it too. He doesn't shoot them. He shoots in the air with you, but he like complains. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Ugh. And I think it's interesting. So I played this on Steam, and the achievement for not shooting them is called a line maintained, and the achievement for shooting them is called a line crossed.
Okay.
The line.
You know, could we just
The
like
line
disregard
shows up.
Steam achievements?
I know, but I think that's the Xbox achievement as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure it is. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, like Steam achievements. That is a funny thing about any type of serious game. Is
that you get
the obligate if it's released on consoles, like it has to have achievements of some sort. And
Yes,
so
even if it's just finish the game.
yeah, and so you get some sort of like this character died of cancer, and then the chapter ends, and you gotta have an achievement there.
Right. Even like for totally narrative, like it is strange that you get achievements for things you have to do.
I actually turned PlayStation achievements off for The Last of Us 2 because I was already like anticipating. It's like, no, I'm just gonna.
That's gonna be weird. Anyway, I just find it interesting because that is one of exactly two instances that anything related to the game references the line. And I'll talk about the other one when we talk about the endings. And it's true in game that is like an even. So you killed a ton of civilians by accident earlier in the game. But the game does give you a choice when it's time to kill them on purpose.
Yeah, because that is an
That is a
accident.
harder line.
Even
yeah.
if you see it as the player, Walker, it's an accident.
Yeah, even if you've played the game already or you guessed. Walker does not know it. Adams and Lugo don't know it. They are all horrified when they do it.
Yeah.
But when Walker and Adams have these civilians in front of them and they can choose to kill them, the game does let you choose. And that's also an interesting thing, of course, because, like, at a meta level, like, when Walker has a choice, we get a choice. Walker doesn't quite have a choice about the civilians in the pit because he doesn't know.
Yeah. Which is just good games writing.
Yeah. So it's interesting. But it's a choice that's never, like, signposted. You have to figure it out.
Yeah, again,
you have to figure out you don't have to kill these people.
They explicitly were like, we're going to do moral choices, but not stupid.
And it's also like, depending on how much you liked Lugo, maybe you want to kill them.
I really would like to meet that person, because I think most people, that is the line where, no, I'm not. Even if you burned rigs, even if you, I don't know, shot, like, ignored the civilians in the first part, I'm going to guess... So there's an achievement for line. Wait a second. Hold on. I guess the Steam achievement percentages can't tell me exactly because I have like both of them, but you can tell just percentage wise who does it more. And unfortunately,
that's a good idea.
Unfortunately, my Steam is taking forever to load on my library.
Let me open the achievements. A line held is the one where you don't shoot them. Let me see if there's one for a line crossed. I can't see the statistics on it right now. But a line crossed is the one for shooting them.
A line crossed, 27 per... Wait a second. Most people kill the civilians. That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. I was completely wrong. At least for people played on Steam, I guess you can't know the Xbox and PlayStation achievements, but that's interesting.
That's crazy to me.
Well, we might be in the minority of
for not shooting. Yeah, because like I feel like maybe people just get tricked into thinking that's the way to advance.
Yeah.
So like this is an obstacle, and the obvious choice is to shoot them, and they just never even think there's an option not to.
From there on out, it's just grueling combat. It's that push, that final push, if I believe.
Yeah, where you're fighting through, and then you have like that push is extremely difficult, obviously.
You get white phosphorus shot at you. Yeah, and you have where Conrad literally says, "Welcome to Hell, Walker."
Yes, and then you eventually fight a heavy trooper who looks like Lugo.
Do you know what? Have you ever died to that?
I have. I died like twice.
Okay, so you saw that like the second time around, it's not him.
It's not. No.
Not a big thing, but it's. I think
interesting choice.
I think it's good because you're not just repeating an emotional beat.
Right. The emotional beat of him looking like Lugo and yelling at you for letting him die is only the first time.
It's also the only time in the game where when you get a death screen, it's a completely different loading screen. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about except Adam finally...
Adams dies.
Yeah.
He does a final stand in which apparently he kills all of the remaining 33rd.
Sure.
If we're to believe certain other things. But now it's just you and Conrad.
Yeah, and you walk up and you are firmly in the whether or not you want to see it as Walker literally dying, you are firmly in the dream state. You're in hell. You're in, not real land. And the fucking guys line up. Like, basically every NPC model.
Yeah,
and they're like,
and salutes you.
Yep, and they're like, hey, good job, buddy. We surrender.
We're all that's left.
You literally killed all of them.
And Walker, I love this because when he enters the Burj Khalifa, it shows a close-up of his face, which you don't get very often because you're from behind him. And he just looks like shit. Like, this part of the skin on the back of his head has been burned off.
Yeah.
and his entire face is just like caked in dirt.
His eyes all fucked up.
Yeah, one of his eyes is like bloodshot, and he just looks terrible. And his clothes are literally falling off, like they've been torn to shreds. It's awesome. It's fucking so cool. And then, yeah, he walks up. You get in the elevator. You go up.
You have a one intel thing. I don't know if you picked that up.
I didn't find it, no.
And it's just a short thing where Conrad goes, he's like talking to his son, and he's like, someday you'll learn about your father, and for that I'm sorry.
Wow. And then you go upstairs and you find Conrad painting
the white phosphorus.
The white phosphorus. The image of the civilians you killed with white phosphorus. And then he goes around the painting, and Conrad's dead. And based on the state of his body, he's been dead for a while.
Yeah.
Like, well before you got there.
And this is where the game just basically straight up talks to you.
Right. It gives you a very long explanation of how everything was fake, and how you / Walker are a fantasist piece of shit who wanted to pretend to be something you're not, a hero. Which is very explicitly aimed at you, the player.
Which I'm struggling a little bit with what to even say, because
no, it's so on the nose you can't.
This is the part that people
either love or hate.
Yeah.
You either are on board for that, or you think it's absurd and pretentious, and you turn the game off. But then, so this is the part we should discuss. Conrad pulls a gun and points it at you, and he starts counting down from 5, and you have to either shoot him or he shoots you, which is actually Walker killing himself.
Or you can aim the gun at you and speed up the process.
You can aim the gun at you because it's this bizarre thing where there's like 2 mirrors and there's
I really like
you.
I like that.
It's a good visual setup. It's a really good visual setup. And it's interesting because I was tricked when I first played the game, kind of.
Okay.
So Walker keeps repeating, "You're not real. This isn't happening." There's a great line where he says, "It's all in my head," and then Conrad responds, "Maybe it's in mine," which I really like. And I thought you were supposed to not shoot him because, like, he's not real. And you should accept reality and not shoot him. But that means you kill yourself.
But that is the right answer.
I don't think that's quite the stance of the game, but it is kind of accepting reality means killing yourself to a degree.
The right answer is the low tier god rant.
You should kill yourself now.
Right. I think you're slightly wrong about that.
Okay.
Because Conrad, what is Conrad in Walker's head is, I guess, an interesting question. Because, so, if you shoot Conrad, he breaks apart like a mirror.
If you're shooting Conrad, you're blaming Conrad.
Right, okay. So that's one reading, I was going to say. You're externalizing all your guilt and then killing it. And therefore, you fulfilled your mission to kill Conrad.
And his quote says, "It takes a strong man to deny what's right in front of him," or something like that.
Right. Because if you accept that Conrad wasn't real, you kill yourself. Because that means, like, it's me. I'm the one who did this, and you shoot yourself.
Hey, what'd you choose the first time around?
I just told you I chose to kill myself.
Right. That's what I did.
That was the point of the story.
Shut up. That's what I did.
I was tricked into killing myself, basically.
That's weird that you... I know, it's just so weird that you tricked, because, like, I chose that as, like, this is what I felt is right at the moment.
No, that's not what I meant to do.
Okay, so
that... Because then I immediately reloaded the level and chose not to kill him. I chose to kill Conrad.
Okay.
And so the first ending is Walker shoots himself, and as it pans over the burning nighttime Dubai, it plays Conrad's final message. And that's the end of the game. That is the first ending. Survivors, what is it? Death toll too many. Death toll too many. That's the final line of that game version. And then there are 3 other endings, and to get any of those 3, you have to kill Conrad. So the first ending, you kill Conrad, he breaks apart, and then you hear Walker making a new message to command. And that one ends with survivors one too many. If you do that, there's actually a whole level that you just don't get if you kill yourself, which is the epilogue.
So what was your second choice then?
My second choice was going home.
Okay. Yeah, and from there, you can kill them all, and you either win in your fight or you die.
Right. So I chose my second choice. I only got 2 endings, and I kind of got one of them by accident. But my second choice was like the quote-unquote good ending of Walker goes home. You put the gun down, and you go home. So that's the one I'll discuss last, because then I want to discuss the other 2.
Okay.
Right, so it's the epilogue. So here's something interesting. So it's like an undefined amount of time later. Walker has a full beard and is wearing Conrad's uniform, which he presumably had to strip off his dead body. So the first thing he did after making the distress call to command was go to Conrad's like several weeks old corpse and take off his jacket, which he's apparently just worn for weeks. Long enough for him to have grown a full beard. And it's interesting because I've seen an interpretation of this game where quote-unquote killing Conrad means that the fact that he's wearing Conrad's jacket here means that the Conrad persona has actually taken over. That his quote-unquote killing Conrad is actually him becoming Conrad. And that's why he's wearing Conrad's clothes. I don't know what that means. That's kind of a shitty theory. But
yeah, because it's like, what to even extent? I think the easier way to read it is like just that, he was the Conrad that you have known in this game. He is Walker, yes. And the choice to have him wearing... it's also like... just makes him look more insane. Yeah, his gaze just... he's like completely
and he's wearing a dead man's clothes and has been surviving in Dubai for, again, a long but unclear amount of time. Because he's carrying one of the automatic shotguns that Zulu Squad uses. And that he's presumably had to use. And then... apparently the American troops did eventually arrive in Dubai, because they come up to Walker and they talk about how this is Captain Walker. He's been AWOL for weeks. We don't know where he was. And then they come up to him and they say, hey, put down the gun and come with us. And you're offered the choice to drop the gun or you can shoot the soldiers. And if you shoot them and kill them all, which isn't very hard. They're not like exceptionally strong enemies, and you've been playing the game up to this point. And
you have a full auto shotgun.
You also have like basically one of the best guns in the game. And if you kill them all, then, as they're dying, he takes the radio from one of them and says, the line he uses, the first line he says chronologically in the game, "Gentlemen, welcome to Dubai." And then it hangs up. Which I guess seems to imply that Walker is going to become what he thought Conrad was.
So that's my question with why shoot the soldiers? What even is that choice?
Player,
but player too, and I think maybe it's like that is just completely succumbing to
the fictional Conrad persona. Like, you are now him. You are Kurtz now.
I don't know about that, but maybe just succumbing to Dubai, where it's like, no, I was never wrong. I'm going to keep doing what I was doing, which is shooting people. And what
you're doing is killing. Just kill. Even if it's, there's no self-defense, it's not in your interest at all. You're just going to kill. You're basically letting them know, hey, come get me. I'm going to kill you. Welcome to Dubai. Like, that's what you are.
This is my place now.
Yeah, this is me. And I'm going to kill. I'm going to kill all of you.
It's owning it.
Right. And then there's the other ending from that choice, which is you try to kill them and fail and are just shot down. And that is the ending where Walker gives a monologue in voiceover recounting presumably this happened in Afghanistan, when Conrad told him that there's a line that men like us need to cross. And that is the only time in the game the concept of a line is referenced.
Besides
explicitly
achievements.
Yeah, besides achievements, but explicitly in dialogue. And it's that ending. The ending that you kind of get by fucking up.
And I wonder how much of that is just, okay, Walker gets to have the last word, when he kills those dudes. And so what kind of note do we end on when he's dead?
Right. It's so interesting that they even program an ending for that. Because you could easily have that just be a checkpoint. But deciding you try to fight them and fail be its own unique ending is pretty cool, in my opinion. And that's the ending that gets the title drop. And of course, if we're talking about character, there are two ways to interpret Walker shooting them in the ending where he dies.
Okay.
One is kind of pathetic, which is that he's trying to be the monster he is in the Welcome to Dubai ending, but he sucks, and he's just immediately mowed down. And the other is that this is just another suicide attempt.
I never
it's suicide by cop.
It that way.
And there it's pretty unsympathetic, because the implication would be that he's unwilling to kill himself, but willing to make someone else kill him. Especially because the monologue is about how, what is it? There's a line men like us need to cross, right? But then does he say something about dying?
I don't remember.
I'm just going to look it up. Right. If we're lucky, we do what's necessary, then we die.
Okay, so that just struck something in my brain. That is you fulfilling the American soldier death wish.
Right. And it's also, you forget American soldier, maybe it's just because I saw the Northman, but the honorable death in general.
Yeah. He gets to go to Valhalla in that ending.
Yeah, in that ending, he gets to die in combat, in battle.
Okay. That's
right. And so that's where I got my reading that maybe he's killing himself.
Okay, that's good. That's because I always that out of all the endings, that one kind of stuck with me the least, and it's like that adds up. I like that.
Or you could read it as totally pathetic, as him wanting to be a monster, but he can't even do that. Because let's be real, the Welcome to Dubai ending is kind of badass.
Maybe it's kind of framing it as, you could say it's like a pathetic trying to be a monster thing, but maybe the game's expectations at that point, it's like, no, the only way you can fuck this up is if you want to, because these are easy guys.
There's 6 guys, and you've played the game to this point, you can beat them, because obviously part of the reason I did that is because I killed myself on purpose,
right?
I wanted to see that ending.
Right.
There's no way I definitely wouldn't have actually lost to those guys. Because, yeah, there's no way you can play the game to that ending and then lose. But then we get to the final ending, the quote-unquote good ending.
Sure.
Where you drop the gun and go home. And then, of course, the final line is...
Who says I did?
How did you survive all this? Who says I did? Which also points to the he was dead the whole time theory.
So, now I guess we got to talk about that. The suicide ending is the only one that doesn't end with a white flash, which leads people to go okay, full Jacob's ladder,
he's actually dead. I don't like that, but he's lying to himself in all of those other endings.
It doesn't necessarily have to mean he's
literally hallucinating. Just that he is not being honest. And again, maybe this ties into the fact that he is wearing Conrad's clothes.
I think you could also read it as, I don't know, if you want to read it more as a hallucinatory ending, just that no one is coming to rescue him. He's there's no one else to fight either. He can't have that ending where he kills them and he's badass. He can't have his Suicide Valhalla ending, and he can't go home. So that's at least one other way you can.
I don't fully agree with that. Like, that the only real ending is you die here. I don't really agree with that, though.
I mean, nothing to agree with. It's just a different way to look at it.
It's a way to read it.
Yeah. But what do you feel like? I guess I want to go back to when you were playing it. What made you feel that killing yourself was wrong?
Well, I generally don't think killing myself's a good idea. And there's also, I guess...
Because I thought, to me, I feel like most people interpret it this way, which is you are accepting what you have done, and yeah, you kill Conrad and you end yourself.
Right. Well, you don't kill Conrad.
Yeah, I mean, you know him. You
let Conrad kill you.
Right. You let him kill you.
Right. Why did I feel that was the wrong ending?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that Walker is totally deserving of death. If he was, you wouldn't have a choice to shoot those civilians. Like, the fact that literally right before the final battle and then the encounter with Conrad, you have the choice whether or not to shoot them.
Yeah, what about that?
It means that Walker is not just inescapably a monster.
I guess, but the whole point of when Conrad is chewing you out is to go, that's like, you should have gone home immediately. This game shouldn't have happened. It's all of it is your fault because you decided to venture forth from the start. And so, yeah, I get that there's, like, humanity, but then again, it's like, what I was gonna say was, like, they assign suicide as accepting the blame, which,
right,
you know, should you associate those two things? And I guess the implication also is Conrad accepted the blame for what he did.
Accepted the blame for the failed evacuation.
But it's weird because suicide is generally looked down on as a cowardice thing to do.
Has anyone ever actually assembled all the scenes that end with a fade to white and the scenes that end with a fade to black?
Like, all together?
Like, had a list of, this is every scene that ends with a fade to white, and this is every scene that ends with a fade to black.
No, but I just remember, like, a lot of those, like, the beginning starts off of, like, fading to white. And that's why despite it, like I said, it's weird that Walt Williams, just most authors don't just kind of give you a key.
Give you that, right.
But maybe that is the point where it isn't a key, because you have white flashes over scenes that are innocuous. And so you can't, if you're trying to do a step-by-step, okay, this is where Walker dies, this is where he hallucinates, you shouldn't do that, because you can't really. Because, of course, I think you said it's like, well, what is, lying to himself explicitly? Sometimes that means hallucinating. Sometimes maybe that's just something a little bit more innocuous.
Basically, I'm trying to see if... Because I remember somewhere I reading that one of the other endings doesn't end with a fade to white, and I'm trying to find...
No, all of them except for the suicide one end with a fade to white. I remember that pretty well. So, I guess to go back just a bit, when you first played the part where Conrad is explaining everything to you, is your mind blown? Are you feeling guilty?
I mean, I don't feel guilty. Maybe I think it's clever. I'm not feeling guilty, and I don't really think my mind is blown.
So, I definitely felt emotional at it, and I think I got to get into some, like, personal stuff, which is just, and this is definitely not, like, a crazy thing, but, I wanted to be in the Air Force, from middle school to high school, and, creepily enough, I strongly believe, even at like the age of 15, I was already enraptured with the sort of death drive, death cult of like, wouldn't it be awesome to die for your country? Of course, and this right here is what was like chipping at the heart of like why I was so emotionally invested with this game, because I had felt that it had truly changed my perspective on like the military. And it's like, is that true? I don't know. I think I went to Air Force camp also later and realized, oh, this just sucks, like on a normal level. And that probably contributed more, because like, oh, this is just like a bunch of walking around. This sucks. But I think I don't know. People come back to this because they hear about the reputation later, in their more like in their 20s and 30s and 40s. But I know there's probably other people where it holds a special place in their heart because they were young men who had nothing else to do and wanted to be like a fucking junior ROCT. And then actually, like the implications of this are actually horrifying. But you know, that's a super personal thing. And like I said, to circle back, I was like, is there more to that than just like my personal emotional reaction to it? Is there politics? Because I read the third book that mentions this game was Story Mode by Trevor Strunk, which he's got his podcast called, I think it's called No Cartridge.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah, he was interviewed on Chapo.
Yes.
And he wrote about this game. You know, had some nice things to say about it, but his last words on it was that the extent of this game's politics are that shooting civilians is bad. And I think after replaying, I think that's completely uncharitable. Yeah, I think that's uncharitable.
I think he's wrong. I think he's wrong about that. I think it's like, obviously that's true, but like, I think that ignores the, because I think people talk about the whole meta thing of like, you're pretending to be a hero when you're not. I think that gets just as applied as a meta commentary on video games and not as like what every American soldier does.
Yeah. So
like, I think it's lazy or kind of uncharitable to be like, that's just about how you're a fat piece of shit for playing a video game.
I think that reaction might just come from, that's what a lot of the writing was, like I talked about before, which was people compared this game a lot to Uncharted.
Right, because it stars
it's a third-person shooter with Nolan North, and it's like, Killing is Harmless says you get to hear Nathan Drake go crazy, because it's like, what if Nathan Drake actually had to think about the like 1,000 people that he killed,
that he murdered, right?
And it's like, okay, and that's how I saw it, and that's why the first time I played Uncharted, I was like, this is dumb. Still don't think that's a good game though. Whatever.
It's kind of bizarre to think that this is a response to Uncharted and not Call of Duty.
Yeah, and like I said, you can take it that way, and I did take it that way and thought about that. But revisiting, it's like, okay, like you said, this is talking about soldiers and maybe wannabe soldiers and just the power fantasy of being in the military, which is, we go back to what we were talking about. They came from Afghanistan to help with relief. And the implications is that Walker shouldn't have never come here, but the military, Conrad, all of it, America, should have never come here.
Even their helpful shit, even when they're just trying to save people, they will only end up committing the most horrific crimes. And maybe there's an objection to that, right? There's an objection to portraying the American military as well-meaning, because they're not. America did not invade Iraq because we were just too stupid, right? America invaded Iraq because of economic motivations, oil, and also just generalized anger at the widespread nationalization of the Iraqi economy under Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, but that's where Dubai comes in, because this isn't an allegory for Afghanistan like in the fucking COD games. This is a friendly country.
Right. And there's also the fact that obviously there are economic interests in Dubai, but those are never brought up in the game, so who knows? But like, yeah, there's an objection to the like American military's well-meaning.
But that's all, like the unwell meaning of the military. That's all people actually making decisions. For you might think yourself as well-meaning if you're in Delta Squad or whatever.
Right, especially because we never see.
You don't see the fucking president.
We don't see we don't see the higher up level of that. We only see the sort of boots on the ground.
We don't see that
level.
It's like we should do this so we can secure more oil, which it wouldn't make sense because we don't actually get that much oil from the UAE. I don't think.
Right.
In comparison, I looked this up at some point, but yeah. I would like my definitive statement is this game has some real politics. Any final thoughts?
So you want to talk about real politics? I hallucinated a line from this game.
Okay.
In my memory that never existed because I think I made it up by being clever and then thought it was. So there's a sequence where.
Was it when he says we're Spec Ops and we cross the line? Was that it?
Shut the fuck up. It was when Radio Man was talking about how he's like, do you know what the 8 most scariest words in the English language are? It's we're Delta Force and we're here to help.
Right.
Which is a twisting of Ronald Reagan's famous saying, the scariest words in the English language were we're the government. We're here to help.
Yeah.
Right. And I had sort of created this thing in my head as a dumb 15-year-old that I thought was clever, and then I think I projected it as being actually in the game.
Okay.
Which is the scariest words in any language are we're American and we're here to help.
But of course Radio Man wouldn't say that.
Or would he? Because Radio
he?
Man, because like you said from that intel, Radio Man is hinted to have more sort of anti-establishment politics.
Until he doesn't.
He's not right until he loses his mind and decide. Well, or does he? Because his whole thing is like, let's lynch some CIA agents.
So your short circuiting is like that's why this game is you could just talk about it forever. Like
right.
There's a lot of different, and even if the dumb readings, there's so many different ways you can take it, and it's just a cleverly written, well-paced video game.
Yeah, it's well done, and it's got. I think we've said some smart stuff here. So are we done?
You all might think that there will be a day when America will leave Nicaragua alone. But I'm here to tell you, flat out, that day will never happen. Because it is our destiny to be here. It is our destiny to control you people. So no matter how much you fight, no matter what you think, we'll be back. Time and time again. By the bones of our American dead in Rivas and Granada, I swear that we will never abandon the cause of Nicaragua. Let it occupy your every waking and sleeping thought. From the future, if not the present, we may expect just judgment.